Hi everyone, welcome back to this channel of crafting, crochet and knitting. My name is Nikki and welcome to my little yarniverse. So hello, welcome if you're new, welcome back if you are a returning viewer. As always, let me know how you're doing by leaving a comment down below. And if you're making anything, be it knitting, crochet or some other craft, then let me know about that in the comments too. I really do genuinely like to see what other people are up to. I find it such an inspiration and I think it's one of the things that makes our little craft community so brilliant, is that we can just take ideas from each other and share them and share techniques. So that is great. If you're enjoying the content on this channel, then please do check out the playlists. There are similar videos in there for 2020, 2021, and of course most recently 2022. So how am I doing? I've been better, honestly. I know I'm trying to be quite upbeat for the video, but I just thought I would be honest and say that things have been a little bit rough recently. I am going to try and keep it upbeat, but I think that it's important to be honest that life is not always great, as we all know. If this can be a little source of joy in your life at the moment, then I will ensure to keep it upbeat for you guys. I've decided that the best thing to do in this situation is to have a nice restful weekend, and thought it would be a good idea to start learning beadwork. So I said I was going to do this a little while ago. I bought a Crochet Society box. Of course I picked the space theme, I'm very on brand. And in that there were patterns involving broomstick lace and involving beadwork, and I've been wanting to learn the beadwork for a while now. I have a project in mind that I would like to make for a friend, and I've already done the video a few weeks back now on the broomstick lace. Loved making that video, found it very relaxing, but I didn't quite like that technique, so we're gonna try it again with beadwork, see how we go. So let's pop this open, shall we? There we go. Oh, get the magazine. I'm being very careful with this box now. Like, if you have these boxes, just bear in mind that if you're wearing any of your homemade stuff, yarn sticks to Velcro. It's not pleasant to remove from Velcro. We don't know that from experience at all, do we? Oops. So yes, I have extracted the magazine. I think I'm looking at maybe doing this pattern actually with the yarn. The yarn and the beads that are in here are lace weight yarns and very small beads, and so I thought that just because this is my very first time doing beadwork, I would learn how to do that with some bigger yarn and bigger beads. And I thought that the most sensible thing to do would be to record me learning how to do this for the first time, because again, what could possibly go wrong? But I think when I come to actually use the yarn in this kit, I think I'm going to do this pattern. I think that that's the one I'm liking the look of most. Unfortunately, I liked the look of the shrug pattern. Let me see if I can find it. I liked the shrug pattern, but it's not very size inclusive. There's a few patterns in there, but none that would go around my arms. I have quite big arms compared to what is apparently the normal female body. So whenever I look at things, I have to get like really oversized stuff, or I have to regrade it myself. So I'm not having much luck in that department. So I thought instead I would make the wrap. I think that's probably what I'm going to do. But I just skipped past the beadwork page. I can only show this side, so you can see they're quite small beads to go with this yarn. So I'm going to read through that section with a lovely cup of a latte and some very nice biscuits that my husband brought back from London for me. He went to a complex called Italy, which apparently was a really lovely complex, despite the punny name, just covered with lots of Italian food places, so gelato places and cannelloni places, and he brought me these back. So I won't attempt to pronounce it because I will butcher the pronunciation, but if you are watching from Italy, I apologise, and please could you let me know in the description how to pronounce this, because I'd love to be able to say it without butchering the pronunciation. I'm going to have that with my latte, I'm going to read my book, and then we're going to attempt to make some beadwork. So yeah, stay tuned. Okay, so I can't remember if I said in the introduction or not, but I'm going to be using this thicker yarn than the yarn that is in the Crochet Society box 29. The yarn in that box is a lace weight yarn and the beads are a lot smaller, so I'm going to be using this DK. It's quite thick compared to some of the DK that I've used, but then I think that's more because that DK is actually thin and this is more like the actual way to a DK. So I'm going to use this with a 4mm crochet hook, and I'm going to use this with some iridescent beads that I picked up from Hobbycraft in this particular occasion. I don't usually get things like this from Hobbycraft. I usually would go to somewhere like Poundland or The Works, but you can go anywhere you want that sells this sort of thing. But I was in Hobbycraft anyway, and these were on offer. So they're just sort of quite clear but shiny beads that I'm going to use. So we're going to put some of these on the table, and I'm going to try not to drop them because I have 2 rabbits that have been circling my feet when I came into this room, and I don't want them to be thinking that these are edible. So we're also going to need some needles for this. Now, usually when I work with yarn, I use a plastic needle that has a big eyelet because it's just easier for me to push that yarn through the eye of this particular needle. However, there's a bit of a problem when it comes to doing beadwork in that this will not go through this eye. I mean, I can force it through, but once the yarn is through there, I don't want to risk breaking that needle. They're surprisingly common in some respects, but then they're difficult to get hold of by themselves. You have to buy a kit for these. I don't really need any more like extra stuff from those kits. So I've actually got this metal needle, which is slightly thinner when it comes to the eye, and it does go through my bead. It won't go through the smaller beads that came in the Society box, but it is fine for these ones. And the eye is still perfectly big enough for me to thread my yarn through. So I'm actually not going to need this piece of thread here, but one trick that they suggest for small beads is that what you can do is you can thread your needle, your small needle, with just some sewing thread like this, tie this in a knot, and then put your yarn, better knot than that obviously, and then put your yarn through this hole like so, and then as you thread your beads onto your thin needle, they'll go over the thread, they'll go over the knot in the thread, and they'll go onto your yarn. Like so. Actually, I just managed to do that when I thought the loose knot that I had done for demonstration purposes was going to come out, but it actually survived. And there we go. So I'm going to put this to one side because I'm going to need that when I do projects with the smaller beads. But for this particular instance, I'm just going to thread a bunch on here. Sorry if I sniff. I'm in the rabbit room. There's hay everywhere. I don't have really bad hay fever anymore, but sometimes it does bother me. So there we go, we're just going to thread a whole bunch of these on. The reason I went for these clear iridescent beads is that I hoped they would have a sort of starry quality to them, and I've got this navy yarn to see whether that idea works or not. So let's thread these on. I might have mentioned in the introduction that I've got a plan to make a project using beadwork for a friend, and for that I'm going to want some much smaller beads, much more delicate looking, you know, nice beads. I don't know if I will go for painted wood beads actually instead of plastic. Kind of want them to look a little shiny. I suppose I could get some sort of metallic ones, but I don't want them to be plastic looking like this. So now we've got those threaded on, we're going to sort of keep them on the end there, and we're going to get our work started as usual, but with the beads on our yarn. So I'm going to just start a simple maybe chain, what, 21, maybe a bit more than that, not sure. I think I might want an even number actually. And I'm going to do some single crochet in US terms or double crochet in UK terms. And I'm going to get it to a little bit more of a length so you can see it, and then I'll join you back here when we first attempt our beadwork. So yes, remember this is not a tutorial, this is me for the first time recording an attempt at beadwork. So I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so I've made 3 rows so far. One thing I will say is that every time I pull up new yarn, these beads kind of do like hit the table and things. It's a little bit annoying, but it's not nearly as fiddly as working the lace, broomstick lace was in a previous video. I'm going to work, let's see how many, we've done 22 stitches, and I've decided that I want to try and make this into something. So I need to try and work out where I want to place my first bead. See if you can work out what I'm making as we go along. The other thing to note is that we don't currently have a concept of a right and a wrong side, because we're just making it backwards and forwards, but once we get those first beads in place, we are going to have established a right and a wrong side convention, so we have to be careful with that. So I think I said I wanted about 8 stitches between my beads. So that's going to be 4 on each side of the half. So I want to work 6 stitches. So let's see, we've done 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I think I want to put my bead here. You'll see what happens at the end, I hope. So I'm going to move my bead up to my stitch. Now we're working a US single crochet, also known as a UK double crochet. So whenever we work beads in this single crochet, the bead is going to sit on the side facing away from us, and that's going to become the right side of the work, and the wrong side of the work is going to be facing us whenever we want to put beads in place. This is also true of the US double stitch, also known as the UK triple stitch. So we're going to just do our single crochet as usual. The bead will sit on this side. So that was stitch 5, and I'm going to do 4 more to get to the middle. I hope I've done my maths right. It'd be really embarrassing to have got my maths wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then in the 5th one I'm going to do another bead. So I'm going to pull it up to my work here. I'm going to do my single crochet as usual. I'm expecting 6 stitches left. So I am a physicist by trade, so I'm hoping my maths is correct. 3 stitches, 4 stitches, it's looking like it. Here we go, that's better. I did previously miscalculate this. There we go. And instead of recalculating it off camera, I decided to do it on the fly. That, you know, that was silly. So I'm going to work a few more rows now because I'd like to get a little bit of height between this row and the next. And I'll join you back here when I have got some more beads to add. So just whilst I finish up this row and get ready to do the next beadwork, seeing as we are looking at the right side, I want to just say that I think if you want a bigger bead, the correct thing to do is to get a more elongated bead rather than an actual just wider bead. So if I hold this up here, you can see that that sticks out absolutely loads from the fabric. And I think that having a bead which is as long as this but doesn't stick out as much, so isn't as round, would have been the way to go. Now, this probably would still work on maybe a chunky yarn where the yarn is thicker, but I think typically the lesson here is you probably want the whole of the bead that the yarn goes through to only be as big as the yarn. I really don't think you want something so circular. So that's just my thoughts on it whilst I'm working on this. Now we are going to work some beads into this line, so you can see we've got the wrong side facing now. I'm talking with far too much confidence for someone who's trying this for the first time, but I think I've got this. I think I understood the instructions right. So let's see, I've done 5 stitches. I think I want to do 8. So that's 6, 7, oh, need more yarn, 7 and 8. Okay, I'm going to get a bead. I'm going to bring it up to our work. We're wrong side facing, we're doing single crochet. I'm going to go in and pull up my stitch, like so. I'm going to do a gap. And then I'm going to bring a bead, and I'm going to finish that stitch, and then I'm going to do a gap, and then another bead. Okay, and I think that I will be happy with that for this row. I'll turn it over in just a few stitches and show you what we've got so far and see if you can tell what I'm making. This has in fact given me an idea for a pattern I want to make, so that's quite cool. So do our turning chain, turn the work, get myself some more yarn. Okay, there we go. Any ideas yet what I'm making? Can you tell? Keep going, shall we? I'll pause the video whilst I make a few more rows and I'll bring you back in for some more beadwork. Okay, so one last look at the right side before I flip it over and do some more beadwork. Can anyone tell what it is now? So yeah, so more comments on this technique as I'm using it. It can be sometimes a little bit annoying holding the fabric with the beads on the back there. Now that could just be because I've got absolutely loads of beads on there, but it's not terrible. I'm actually thinking more than anything that maybe I've used a too small a hook size with this yarn. The fabric is quite dense, so perhaps that would also help matters. I've been thinking as I've been working on this about how different sized beads within the work could also go. So like rather than just using one type of bead like I've got here, I've got these all from the same pack, actually using some different styles of bead in the same thing, in the same piece. So I not get too distracted, I need to put a piece of, oh no, I need to put a bead in. So don't start the stitch. Just pull the bead up first and then do the stitch. There we go, that's another bead in place. So yeah, I've been enjoying this, definitely. I've been feeling some ideas come to mind, and I had been feeling in a bit of a creative slump, so I'm so glad that I've got some ideas. But there's one more bead in place. I just need to... I'm really sorry if you can hear like papers and card and stuff in the background rustling away. My rabbits are currently chewing through a cardboard box. Yes. What was I saying? I think I was saying that I've got some ideas for some tutorials actually in the future. I think I'll talk more about that when we close the video though. Right now I'm just trying to get my yarn through that stitch. So yeah, it can be a little bit fiddly to get your hook behind both parts of the stitch behind a bead, but it's not impossible, so just be persistent with it. Can anyone tell yet? I feel like if you haven't got it yet, you're not aware of what's going down. I've just got one more bead to place in, so I'm going to get to the end of this row and then I'm going to work 6 stitches and then I'm going to put a bead in the 7th and then I will finish off with a few rows. So this has been pretty simple. I'm going to finish this piece of work and then I'm actually going to make another swatch and I'm going to do some different stitches as well so we can see how it looks, how beadwork looks with different stitches. So that's 3, 4, 5 and 6. Of course it doesn't matter if you thread on too many beads because you can always just, when you snip your yarn, you know, take the beads back off and put them in the bag. You don't want to get into a situation where you've got too few beads. However, if you are going to work with different sized beads, like I was just suggesting, then you might want to think about which beads you're going to hit first and in what order they're going to be so that you know what sizes to thread on in what order. And of course it's going to be reverse order as well, so you're going to be putting the last beads on your yarn first. Okay, so I'm happy with my beadwork. I'll get to the end, I'll turn it around, I'll show you all the beads in place and then I'll pause the video and just finish this piece off because I think I am actually going to keep this. I don't usually keep my swatch work like this. I just practice with it then frog it back, but I want to keep this one, so there we have it. A very, very simplified form of the constellation of Orion. So yeah, we've got Orion's belt. This is why I think that some small beads would help. I could maybe put more detail on there because there are more stars in the constellation of Orion than there currently are on this swatch. But if you look in the sky and you see this sort of hourglass egg timer shape, that is Orion. And there we have it. It is now off the hook and complete. So yeah, really happy with this. I think I need to work on the dimensions slightly and try and add some more detail, but overall I'm really happy with how this came. I'm going to pop this to one side and I'm going to bring my yarn back in and I'm going to try just some generic stitches. Now I'm not going to do anything fancy for this. I'm going to just very quickly make a chain and do a row, and then I'm going to try some different stitches. So the first thing that we're going to try is the US double crochet or the UK treble crochet. Once again, I apologise for the sound of rabbits in my background. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, sure. Let's just do a tiny one. So we're gonna do 2 turning chains. I'm going to do a US double crochet or a UK treble crochet in the second one from the hook, and I'm just going to go all the way down here and I'll join you back when I've reached the end of the row. Okay, so we are at the end of the row. I really wish I'd gone up a hook size actually. I'm just going to do chain 2 and then turn. I'm going to go a few into here so we don't go and put a bead right on the edge of the work. So unlike the US single, where you just have to really pay attention to which side of the work your beads are on. So if you're adding any new beads, you just have to make sure that the beads are currently facing away from you. It's the same with the US double, except that we have to be more careful about when we place our bead. So we would actually not put the bead all the way up to our hook just yet. We would start the stitch. So we do everything up to this final 2, and then before we do the yarn over and finish the stitch, that's when we'll stick our bead in place. So we'll yarn over and pull through this final 2. And then when we go into our next stitch, that bead will sit facing away from us again. So I'll just work a couple of blank stitches and then we'll do that again. Let's do one in the next stitch. Okay, so like I say, we're not going to put the bead straight up against our hook when we start the stitch. We're going to start the stitch by yarning over, going through, yarning over and completing the first step there. So we're up to these last 2 stitches on our hook, and before we do the yarn over to complete the stitch, we're going to pull the bead up. It's going to sit away from us. We're going to yarn over, pull through those 2 to finish our stitch, and that bead's going to sit at the back. Then we're going to do a few more blank stitches. So again, we need to remember when we're doing a US double crochet or a UK triple crochet that we want to have the beads facing away from us when we add new ones. So we're going to start the stitch, we're going to yarn over, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, leaving 2 stitches on our hook, pull a bead up to the work, yarn over and pull through. I feel like this is by no means an exhaustive way to do beadwork, but this is a way that will consistently get your beads onto the front of your work. So I'm going to do another row just to clear some space, and then we're going to look at another stitch. Okay, so at the risk of making this video ridiculously long, for which I do apologise, I first just want to recap our single crochet and our double crochet, those are US terms, before we move on to the next stitch, which is a US half double crochet. And there is an important distinction. So we need to remember that for our single crochet, we added beads when the wrong side was facing us. This doesn't particularly matter on this particular piece of work for the first row, but once we established a right side to our work, it was important that we remained consistent, and we only ever added beads when the wrong side was facing us and when the right sides, or the beads, were facing away from us. This is also true of the US double stitch. We make sure that when we're adding more beads, we are consistently adding when any prior beads are facing away from us, or when the right side of the work is facing away from us, if that matters to the piece that you're working with. Now, you might be thinking, okay, I've just finished a row on the wrong side and I've made my turning chain and I've turned. I'm about to start working on the right side of the work. Now this is because the last row that I made was a row of half double crochets. So we're going to start by doing another half double crochet into these next few stitches, and then we're going to try and add a bead. So the distinction being that this time I've got the right side of the work facing me. Okay, we're going to bring a bead up to our yarn. We're going to yarn over, we're going to go through and pull up a loop. Now our bead is at the back and we don't want it at the back, so what we're going to do is we're just going to thread it over the hook, and then we're going to yarn over and finish our half double crochet. And now that bead is sat on the front of our work. Now I guess that means, strictly speaking, it's possible to work in a half double bead when we're working with the wrong side facing us. I will try that in a little bit, but for now let's just look at the method that I've been taught through the Crochet Society, we're going to, before we begin our stitch, for the half double, we're going to bring our bead up to the work, we're going to yarn over, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and before we finish this stitch, we're going to bring our bead round to the front, over the hook, and then we're going to yarn over and pull through all three. Okay, so I'll just do a few more half double crochets. So in the UK terms, this would be a half triple crochet. Okay, and again, before we start this stitch, we're going to bring a bead up to the plate. I'm going to yarn over, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull through. We're then going to bring our bead over our hook round to the front, yarn over and finish the stitch. So that is different from the way that the book describes doing single and double crochets. What I'm going to do now is I'm quickly going to do a few rows so that we get clear of this particular part of the work, and then I'm actually going to see whether I can do a few experimental approaches. So stay tuned for that attempt. Okay, so I've just finished a couple of rows to give us some space. I'm now turning my work to the wrong side. We're going to attempt some experimental stitches right now with our beadwork. Now, if you're not comfortable with how to do beadwork with a single crochet in US terms or a double crochet in US terms, then I would suggest you go back to those segments of this video and have a little look. Likewise, if you've not seen it worked for a half double crochet before, again in US terms, I suggest jumping back to that section of the video, because I'm actually going to do something different to what the Crochet Society booklet has said here. You would yarn over, go through the stitch, yarn over and pull up a stitch, and the right way to do it, or the way that I've just learnt would be to pull the bead over from the back to the front of your work before completing. I'd like to know what happens if I leave the bead at the back of the work, which is why I've currently got the wrong side facing me now, so that the bead would be sitting on the right side with all the others. I want to see if I yarn over now and complete this stitch and leave the bead at that side, how that's going to look. So it hasn't been brought to the front accidentally, it's still on the back of the work, so I'm going to do a few more and then we're going to compare the two rows. Okay, so I'm going to do another one here, because if this is the case, then this is an alternative way to do the half double crochet beadwork that doesn't require you to work on the opposite side to how you would for a single or a double crochet. Okay, I think I'll do one more here. These might not be lined up to my original ones. Okay, let's finish this last stitch and turn around and take a look. Okay, so this is interesting. I don't know how well you're going to be able to see on camera. So first I'm going to make one more row. I'll just pause the video, make one more row, and then I'll show you what's happened. Okay, so now that I've just worked that up and got that out of the way, and hopefully before I lose too much of this light. Okay, on my single crochet work, all of the beads are slanting ever so slightly in this direction, okay? They're all slanting from the bottom right to the top left. That same, sorry, no, that hasn't happened here. On the double crochets, it's actually slanted in the opposite direction. It's slanted from the bottom left to the top right of the stitch. With the sort of quote-unquote correct way of doing the half trebles, the stitches have, half doubles in US terms, half trebles in UK terms, my bad. They align in the same way as the single crochets do. They align from the bottom right to the top left. Now, two things are different between this technique and the one I've just tried. So in the one I've just tried, we've gone for a bottom left to top right slant, so it's opposite to the slant that the other half doubles have got. It is the same slant as the double stitches has got. But also what's happened is when you do a half double, you have a sort of extra stitch that sits behind the work. Now, when you're working in rows like this and you turn it round, that stitch does stand out. There's one here, for example, sitting above where our beads are. But if you don't bring the bead from the back of the work over the hook and round to the front, then it's actually this stitch that it is sat on. Now you can't see that in this work because of where you've worked back into the row, and because you've threaded it from the back of the hook to the front of the hook, so it's in a slightly different location. It looks like it's sort of sitting sort of in the valley of these half double stitches. But in the case where we leave it at the back of the work instead, we've actually ended up putting these beads essentially on the peak of it. So because of where that ridge of extra stitching is in the half double, you will have a sort of a valley and a peak and a valley and a peak where those stitches are on both sides of the work. So the way where you bring the bead from the back to the front will position your beads in the valley part, and if you leave it on the back, it will actually be on the peak, and it will look like it's sort of sat on a row of stitches. Now, dark yarn really was the poorest choice for showing this on video, but I'll zoom in and I'll just, hopefully you can see it. And if you couldn't, I'll zoom back out again, and instead I'll try holding this up at an angle to the camera. So here is our sort of peak that our beads are sat on, and then here's a peak on this side and a peak on this side, and our beads are actually sat in the valley instead on this particular piece. And hopefully you can see that they're slanting in different directions as well. So hopefully by showing you it in both those ways, either the zooming in will have worked or me holding up to the camera will have worked. And you can see the difference. So that was experiment number 1. There's one more thing I'd like to try, and for this, my beads that are currently over here are not actually in need. My beads over here are. I would like to see how possible it is to add a bead to a piece of work when you haven't already threaded it on in advance, but when you think about it after the fact. So I'm going to do another row, just again to get us some space. Actually, no, I might work into this row. Let's do. No, I'm gonna do another row, and then I'm gonna get some single crochets going, just because I think that would be the simplest opportunity here. So I'll just pause the video and I'll come back when I've cleared a little bit of space in our swatch. Okay, I am currently not super bothered by what side of the work I'm on, because I have no idea how this bead is going to position itself. So we're working some single crochets. I'm going to put a bead in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can pull my loop up, and if I can thread a bead onto the loop. So I'm going to put my yarn through there and pull it onto the whole loop, and then I'm going to put my hook back through the loop and pull it tighter again. Okay, and then I'm going to do another single crochet. So how does that look? That looks okay. I guess the problem that I would have is that I don't have a stitch now to work into because the bead is on the stitch. I mean, that's not the end of the world. I could do a chain to work around the back of it, or it could have been, it could be a deliberate attempt, like with the half doubles. It's giving me another idea. I'm gonna do that again. So I pulled my loop nice and big, I put my yarn onto my needle, I put a bead over the loop, I put my hook back into the loop, and then I worked into the stitches. And then I'm going to work my way back using a chain to get around the back of those stitches. And see how well that works. So single stitches wherever I can single crochets. Okay, I can't get into this bead. Maybe I can actually. There seems to be enough space. What if I do single crochet into it? How does that look? It looks a bit squashed really, actually, if I'm honest. On this side it's not as bad. Okay, let's try that one again. Okay, so there is actually enough space to be able to do a single crochet into the hole that the bead is on. Now this does mean that on one side of the work it kind of looks like there is a piece of yarn like over the bead, so it doesn't look so great, but it looks like you can push it to either side of the work if you want. But it does mean that beads could be poked out of place quite easily, I think, looking at that. But that's not terrible. I expected that to be worse. I think for the chunky beads that I have here, that's maybe a little bit better, but let's just frog that row back and see what happens if we try and chain around the back instead. So if I chain one and then I go into here, so I'm trying to push that yarn a bit further forwards, not that yarn, sorry, that bead. Or does it look like I'm going, it looks like it's trying to go over the top of the bead actually rather than around the back of it. Let's have a little look. Okay. So again, that's not a terrible look. It means the bead kind of sits more in the work rather than on top of the work. And you can see the bead on both sides. It's reversible. Now if you were going to use this for clothing, that's probably not great. I'm just going to go back across here because when you come to do the next row, if you've got a chain, you're going to have to work into a chain space. And I don't know what that's going to do to the look of the work around the bead. So let's have a go. Would I go into the chain space, the whole space? Yes, let's go into the whole space. Let's not try and work into the top of the chain. So this is very much trial and error now. Okay. At the end of the row, how does this look having worked around that? Not too bad actually. Like I say, the beads are now in the work. You can see them on both sides. They're not, I guess they're not as lined up as maybe you would want them to be. So they're now lining up like along here, but there is slight tilts in place that aren't really controllable. So yeah, I think you could do some beadwork after the fact if you really needed to, but in the knowledge that that bead will be on both sides of your work rather than on the right side of your work. But that would technically do it. I don't know how that would then also look if you needed to do a double crochet in US terms or a half double crochet, because I very much stuck that over the loop of a single crochet. But But yeah, there we have it. Some experimentation with the beadwork after the fact. Sorry that this video was such a long video. I hope you forgive me for that. I'm going to wrap it up now, so I'll see you in just a second. So there we have it, some beadwork, my first attempt at beadwork. I am quite happy with how this came out. I was having a bit of a rough time with it, and I was also feeling very uninspired in my crafting. And I've got a few bigger projects on the go at the moment, which I was beginning to get a little bit bored with. I'm wondering, okay, how can I stay motivated and things like that, you know, trying to use my tricks that I put in a video a few, probably a month or so back now. And actually doing this beadwork has really given me loads of ideas, so many ideas, and just, yeah, got me being inspired and imagining patterns and thinking about, actually, is there a pattern that I can write up and actually put a Ravelry or something, because I really loved how this worked out. And I know that's a bit gushing and I'm being very cryptic. I'm not speaking much about what those ideas are, but there's quite a few different ones, and I really want to go away and play with this some more and make up a template, and yeah. I want to see what I can do. I want to try and get hold of some smaller beads and to work with some different sized beads, all in one piece of work. So rather than just using smaller beads for smaller yarn and bigger beads for bigger yarn, I actually want to look at the shape of the beads, and how using different shaped beads in one piece of work would actually appear, what it would look like, what effect it would have, and provide a simple version and a more elaborate version of some of my ideas. Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better after today, actually, and things are still going to be tough over the next week or so, but it's been nice to have a little bit of light relief today in the form of working on this for you guys. So we made that piece just in single crochet very simply, and then we had another little experiment with this piece here, doing some larger stitches, looking at the orientation of the stitches, so how they sort of lean in the work, and then also seeing whether or not we could put beads in after the fact. So I know it's been a bit of a long video, but I've just had so much fun putting this little swatch together, discussing it, looking at the technique. I found that this for me has just been the best of both worlds, because I often see crafters online discussing their creative process and what inspires them and their colour work and their artistic nature, and I am artistic, but often I find that compared to those people who do this like as a job, and the artist work in the form of yarn is their job, that I am very much more pattern orientated. I am very mathematical and scientific, and what I have typically enjoyed in the past about the creative process has been more deconstructing a pattern and working out how it was put together and how I can change it. And this can be frustrating in the terms of trying to redesign a pattern to fit a different body type, because that's a lot of work and that's a lot of, recalculating, and at that point you probably should have just made the design yourself. But when it comes to actually looking at chevrons or ripples, the way the fabric can be made to go in a 3D texture, so actually like the yarn can be pushed off the work, the slant of the beads, how the stitches form, how they look, and the difference between that and knitting. Those are the sorts of things that I think about in crafting, and what can I do to manipulate this and turn this into something else and something new. So I've today been able to be inspired creatively, taking a theme that I love and putting that into craft, but also inspired mathematically by the way that things work up on the material. So I've had a good day. Thank you for being with me whilst I have this good day. I hope that you might want to try beadwork off the back of this. I'm definitely happy to report that I enjoyed the beadwork much more than the lace work. I found the lace work really awkward and fiddly. This is a little bit annoying when you're working on the side where you have to be like holding the beads, and so they're on your fingers a bit more, but that's a minor irritation in comparison, and the effect I think is so much more obvious, and I'm looking forward to playing with that effect some more. So I'm gonna stop whittering on. This video has gone on long enough, but thank you again for coming along on this journey with me, and I hope that you enjoyed the video as much as I did, and I'll see you in another video really soon, I hope. Bye for now.